All right. I am so excited that you are here today. I mean, we've been so excited, we barely could even sleep just to create what's going to happen. Because you know what's going to happen today? We are going to release an avalanche of generosity into our community. Okay, all right, here it is. Here's all of our, Mariners is gathered all around, Southern California. Here's a list of all of our churches, all of our communities, those online, Sunday night, the chapel, Ocean Hills High. All of these together, we're working together, and everybody in our church. What we hope to do is to release an avalanche of generosity to change Orange County. Now, is that exciting or what? Come on, there it is. Now, this has been the story of our church from the beginning. We've looked at God's Word, and we saw what God's heart was for the poor and the needy, the marginalized, those with less. And we got involved with our time and our talents and our treasure. And as a result, we were transformed. We learned about God's heart. And we got to partner with God in what He's doing. And most importantly, when we got involved, we learned and got to act out the most important story in our life. The story when we were poor, marginalized, broken, had no spiritual resources. But Jesus came to rescue us. He became like us. He loved us. He paid our debt so that He could make us rich in every way. So when we get involved serving with the poor and the needy, we act out our own story. And in a powerful way, our redemption story becomes way more personal. And so we got involved with some of the most extraordinary organizations in Orange County that are doing amazing work. Helping children, helping the hungry, working in the medical areas, helping those that can't get it, helping those who have foster care. And then some of you, as you went out to get involved, you discovered there were holes, there were things that weren't happening. And so you created organizations on your own to do things that were powerful to change our community. And what we want to do today is that we've spent a lot of time going to all of these wonderful organizations, and we have chosen 50 projects that we want to release money to in the next 2 weeks that's absolutely going to change. The majority of them are right here in Orange County, and all our churches are doing that, and then some even globally in the world. And here's what we want to do. If you would pull out this card, here's what we want to accomplish today. On this card, you can see we want you to give serving some time, and for just a few hours, we can reach and change in these 50 projects. We can do this together if just a few hours of everyone gets involved. We're going to talk about how much money it will take for each one of you. And then also we want to change, the food banks are down low. We want everybody to fill up a bag of groceries and to help restock those. So here's what we want to do specifically. We want to release $500,000 through our churches into Orange County and the world in the next couple of weeks. There it is. So there's the goal. Now, next week, Marathi is going to be here. I know. You've heard Marathi. He's a pastor from Nairobi. He is a partner with us. And every time he comes, you love him. So I want to give you a heads up. And you want to invite your neighbor. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell your friends, the people you work with, people in your neighborhood, about what we're doing, what you're doing as a church. We're releasing an avalanche of generosity into our community. Because do you know what we want to be known as? We want to be known as generous people. I mean, people are skeptical about a church, especially a large church. But God's people should be generous people because generosity, it just breaks down barriers. It just tears down walls, and it makes the difference. And that's what if there's one thing that, if I could capture people's opinion of us, the one thing I'd want them to say is Mariners is a generous church. And the reason is because it's core to the gospel. It says that God so loved the world that He gave. There's one thing that I'd love for them not to know about, it's not our buildings, it's not our theology. It's that we are generous people, so generous that people in our community would say, I don't even want to be one of them, but I'd love to work for one of them, or I'd love to hire a bunch of them, or I sure want my kids to be married to their kids, because those people are generous people, and we can shape and change the world through generosity. So that's what we're going to do today. So you ready? All right. Now, we're in a series titled Christian. And the reason that we're talking about Christian is because it's almost a useless term in the world today. I mean, you think about it and you ask somebody, what is a Christian? You will get 10 answers if you ask 10 different people. And in our culture, you can make Christian mean whatever you want, and we do. People are on both sides of every issue. Just for example, when it's not so close, in the Civil War, there were Christians on both sides on the Civil War churches and both defending their positions. Today, you find Christians on every side of political issues, every side of financial issues, every side of legal issues, every side of social issues. And the problem is you just can't define it. I talk to people every week, and they talk to me about a decision they've made, a lifestyle choice, something they believe. And I listen to what they're saying or doing or believing, and I go, "Are you a Christian?" And they go, "Yeah, I'm a Christian." I go, "How do you do that or think that?" And they go, "Well, that's what it means for me to be a Christian." And you go, who's got the right definition of Christian? And I can tell you why it's a problem in our culture today. Because there is no place you can go for a definition of Christian. You can't go to the Bible for a definition of Christian because the term Christian is only used 3 times in the New Testament. And it was a derogatory term that people chose for the people who were outside of the Jesus movement, chose this term, and they called people on the inside the term. It wasn't a positive term. So it's like, if you were a follower of the Grateful Dead, you were called a deadhead. And, that was a derogatory term. Then they put it on a T-shirt and, sort of became what they were called. If you're a person who loves technology and you can fix computers and stuff, initially people would call you a geek. But now they put it on the side of a van and it's, then we think of that. Well, Christian, you need to understand, it's only used 3 times in the New Testament. Jesus never used the term for his followers. The followers of Jesus never embraced the term, the community in the New Testament for it. And so you really don't have a way to clearly define it. And so when you go out in the world, and let's just be honest, if you would ask the world, give me a working definition for Christian, what would people who don't go to church, maybe even a little, against the church, what would they say? Christians are judgmental, homophobic, moralistic, people who believe they're the only ones going to heaven and secretly relish the fact that the rest of us are going to hell. And the problem is, and while you don't like it, and I don't like it either, every week it seems like somebody shows up on the news, and that's exactly what they look like, and they're calling themselves a Christian. You say, well, let the church define what is a Christian. Well, what do churches say Christians are? Well, if you get baptized, or if you believe a certain doctrine, and believing typically tends to be the highest deal. And why do most people walk out of churches, give up on it? Because they go, you say one thing and you so don't live another. And it's like you people can say, as long as you believe this, but your behavior simply doesn't matter. And you leave it up to churches, and people who go to churches. You can call anybody and anything a Christian in the world today. The term is absolutely useless. But Jesus used a different term for his followers. And his followers embraced that term, and this term's a way more cool term, and it's a way more exciting term, and it's a more powerful term because it's a term that has a very clear definition in the Bible. What was the term that Jesus called his followers? They were called disciples. And a disciple meant an apprentice or somebody who was a follower or a learner. And the reason why I love this term is it's clearly defined in the Bible. You can't have your own little private definition for a disciple because Jesus made it really clear as to what a disciple is. He clearly defined it. And what I love is we're going to talk about it. And it's powerful and it takes a lot of courage. And I think for a lot of us, what you're going to have to decide is, are you a Christian? Are you a disciple? You call yourself a Christian, you can have at it and do whatever you want because the world will let you do it. And that's just sort of a word that, I don't even know what the definition is. But disciple? Oh, it's got a clear definition. So let's look at what Jesus said about follower, disciple. When he called his followers, first thing he said is, come, follow me. That's what they were defined as, people who follow Jesus. And then, before Jesus left this world, he gathered his disciples together, his followers, and he made it really clear what was the defining concept of what is a disciple. You should all know it. It's just pop right out. In case you don't, here's the verse. And he said, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples Read it with me. If you love. He goes on, love one another. The defining quality of a follower of Jesus is that they love. They love just like Jesus loved us. That's the defining quality. You can't, that's it. I mean, you can fight all you want. He goes, but that's what a disciple is. They love, and they love like Jesus loved. And Jesus goes on. This is in the upper room when he's talking to his disciples, and he says this. If you ever have a position of power, because Jesus says all power has been given to me. If you ever have a position of power or authority, or you have any money, or you have any opportunity, you need to understand it wasn't given to you for you. It was given so that you could bless those who have less. And then Jesus does the most incredible thing. He models it. He gets down on his knees and he washes the disciples' feet, showing he's the guy with all the power, all the opportunity. He serves them. And he says, now, this is what I want you to go and do. And the world's going to know that you're my disciples because you love like I love. You serve like I serve. So, my question is, Christian, disciple, which one are you? Which one do you want to be? Because loving like Jesus loves, that's a high standard. And it's not a soft, like kind of, oh, well, yeah, I'm a loving person. It gets real. So let's just have a little parenthesis. It's just us. Before I get wound up on another subject, but just here. What does it mean then you love? I mean to be a loving person. Because it gets real nice when you go, yeah, I'll go try love. He didn't say go try. He says you're going to be a loving person because when you know Jesus, your life has been transformed and you will love. That's a love of a different kind. So lots of you, as I talk and you go, hey, I'll love, but my wife, she's crazy. My husband, he's a mess. And teenagers, who can love them? And if you're a teenager in here today, you're pretty sure there isn't a parent or a young adult. Your parents haven't had an original thought since 1970. And so you go, how to love them? But here it is. If you're going to call yourself a disciple, what is going to be your response to them in life? You're going to love them just like Jesus loved you. And it does not mean, in this verse, does Jesus say, if you love like I loved you, it's going to work out for you? And people are going to love you back? Because you remember where Jesus ended up on a cross. So it didn't work out for him. And for some reason, I talk to people all the time, and they call themselves, I'm a Christian or follower of Jesus. And they go, well, I'm trying to love my wife, and like I tried for 10 weeks, and it's just not working. But Jesus didn't say here, it's not a means to an end. Loving people is not a means to an end, and it isn't going to fix everything. Jesus says, if you're my disciple, what you're going to do in every situation is you're going to, come on, you're going to love like I loved you. That's a disciple. Be a Christian if you want. But that's what a disciple is. We live different. That's what a disciple looks like. So, you a Christian? Are you a disciple? Now, we're going to talk about compassion specifically, and right away you go, oh, good, boy, I like compassion because I am a compassionate person. I've seen those ads on TV where they show starving people, and I have a strong emotional response in those moments. In fact, sometimes I even cry, so I'm going to win on this one, right? I got compassion down. But here, Jesus describes what compassion looks like. He didn't leave it open for you to describe. Christians will describe compassion, but Jesus described it very clearly in the second most known story in the Bible that he told. So I'm going to tell you a story so you know exactly what compassion looks like. A guy who was an expert in the law is trying to, find out some things, and it says in the Bible that he wanted to feel good about how he lived. He was kind of a Christian, like we talk about Christian, and he wanted to feel good about being a Christian. And so he came to Jesus and he says, what do I really need to do? What do I need to do? And Jesus said, well, what does the Bible tell you to do? And he says, well, to love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said, that's right, do that. And so he figures, you can see his brain working. He's going, well, I've got the love God down, which is ironic right there. And he goes, but so loving your neighbor, how far does that go? What does it really mean to love your neighbor? I mean, how big of a category is that? Do I have to love people who I like? Do I have to love people who, live on my neighborhood? Do I love people who are like me? Because, It can't be everybody, right? So it's got to be a pretty confined group. So Jesus tells them a story that's going to answer the question, who is your neighbor? And then he even answers a bigger question, which is, what does neighbor love look like? So this guy who's trying to, make the group as small as he can, here's how Jesus answers him. He tells them this story that you'll never forget. There was a man who was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he was a victim of a robbery. In fact, they stole everything from him, stripped his clothes, he's naked, and they beat him up. He is near death. The first person who comes by is a person like me, a pastor person who's like paid to be spiritual. And that person sees him, right? But think of it, there's Jesus' story, and he walks by him, okay? He doesn't do anything, just ignores because he's busy. He's got things to do. Got to go teach a Bible study somewhere. Can't do that. And then the second person that comes by is somebody just like you. They're a church person, a good church person, where people even know you show up at church. And you walk around him. And then the third person that comes is a Samaritan. And as soon as Jesus says Samaritan, Jewish people that are listening to him, they hated Samaritans. They hated Samaritans. They thought they were half-breeds. They thought they were less. They thought they had a right to be prejudiced to them. They were of the wrong religious group and the wrong ethnic group in every way. They were the wrong. And if there was one person that wasn't going to help this guy who was a victim of injustice, it would be a Samaritan, because the guy that was on the road was a Jew, and the Jewish person that had been beat up was the very kind of person that had oppressed the Samaritans their whole life. And Jesus says the Samaritan stops and helps them. Okay, now if you had been listening to the story right there, you would be gasp, appropriate. Whoa, okay, so give it to me, all right? So Jesus says that guy stops and helps the victim. Very good. All right, very good. And so the answer to the question, who is my neighbor, is absolutely staggering, because Jesus says, you just imagine the person who you are most uncomfortable with, who their religious beliefs make you most uncomfortable. Their ethnicity makes you most uncomfortable. Just whatever category you want that makes them uncomfortable, prejudice, your ethnic race, religious beliefs, that person, that's your neighbor and everybody else. There you go. See, now one of us is listening here. See, he goes, whoa, so that's who your neighbor, so you don't get out. It extends to your nightmare. Then he says, what does neighbor love look like? And he says, look at what this Samaritan does. He gets down and he picks up this guy who's been beaten up. He bandages him. He gives him basic medical care. He gives him some food. He puts him on his donkey. He cares for him. He takes him to an inn. He pays his expenses. He gives him even more money, and he promises to return. That's radical generosity from a person who's hurt you, abused you, and somehow taken opportunity from you. That's what it looks like. And at the end of the story, in case you didn't have it, Jesus says, which of these three do you think was a neighbor? The expert of the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. So, you a Christian? Or are you a disciple? Because Jesus made it really clear what a follower of Jesus looks like. The second story I want to tell you, Matthew 25, is absolutely the most powerful story. And it is powerful to me, and it changed my life. And Jesus, in Matthew 25, you have this epic scene. And it's at the end when Jesus returns to this world. He sets up his kingdom forever. He is sitting in the place of honor, and all of humanity is standing before Jesus. Here is the great moment where he divides all of humanity. And everybody wants to disagree about what divides them, but Jesus makes it really clear. This is what divides all of humanity. And he says, separates one group on his left, one group on his right. He turns to the one group that he calls the sheep, and these are the people that he loves. And he says, you are so good, and I love you because you have honored me. And here's the shock. He says, because I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty. You gave me something to drink. I was a stranger. I didn't know anybody or anything. I was vulnerable. You invited me in. I was sick. You gave me basic medical care. I was a prisoner. I was a victim to my own poor choices, and I was oppressed by some kind of addiction or literally in prison, but I was oppressed, and you cared for me. I was absolutely overwhelmed. And the surprise is everybody on this side says, Jesus, when did we ever see you sick or hungry or thirsty or oppressed and in prison or needing medical help? And he says, inasmuch as you did it to the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it to me. Jesus says, every day I cleverly show up in your world disguised as the poor, the marginalized, and the forgotten. But you loved them, you loved me. Then he turns to the other group of people and he says, away from me, you're done, you're out, you're gone forever, you're going south. And here's why. Because I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. I was hungry, you didn't feed me. I was a stranger, you did not invite me in. I needed basic medical help. I was sick, you did not care. And I was a prisoner and I was oppressed and you didn't take care of me. And everyone cried out and said, but we never saw you. And he said, inasmuch as you didn't care about the least, you didn't care about me. And you know what the shock is in that story? There's no parachute clause. He doesn't say, but you went to church, or you prayed a prayer, or, you believe something. Because this is what Jesus is saying. Anyone who puts their faith in Jesus and trusts in him and understands the love of Jesus is absolutely changed at their core. And because they're changed at their core, they automatically are going to be loving people. Because that's the single defining quality of a Christ follower, is that we are people who love. So, my question is, you a Christian or are you a disciple? Because Jesus didn't leave any kind of slack in his definition about what a disciple is. And you know what? The first century Jesus people got it right. They understood what it meant to love their neighbor. They understood what it meant to love the least. In fact, do you know why Christianity made it to the 21st century and you got to hear the good news? Because those people got it so right. Because there were plagues that swept through that area of the world in the first century, in the second century, and the third century. 3 major plagues. And do you know what it was that would not leave the cities and stayed to help those people who were sick? It was Jesus followers, the Jesus people, the people of the way. And those people would stay even at the risk of their own life. And many of them died because they weren't afraid of death. Because you know what they did every week? They gathered to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus and that one day they would be resurrected too. And they stayed. And people turned from their beliefs. And they turned towards Jesus for one reason. It was the generosity of the people of God. Today, you have a faith. And the reason that faith is here is because of the generosity of all of the Christ followers, the Jesus followers before you ever got here. It was the radical generosity of Jesus people that has always taken the message of Jesus and changed the world. That's who we are. That's our heritage. And that's how we can change Orange County. It's how we can change the world. Watch this. Here's a group of people who are radically generous.
When I looked at this town, it felt like they needed to be loved. We also saw sadness. We saw desperation. We saw kids growing by themselves, no parents around, because they're all working, but not necessarily making enough money to make a good living, just to survive. We saw a place that needed love. My dad just said, one day we're gonna plant a church here, in this empty lot, and everyone just didn't believe. We started working on an empty lot in Rojo Gomez, spreading just love, giving away clothing, shoes, food, and people started feeling that they had something going on there. So now we are providing the community with love and hope, we started to see a change in the community. Now we have seen the kids develop more. We have less dropouts. We have better efficiency on the kids. They're doing better on their tests and they're doing better at school just because of their having a meal every morning. Working alongside with Partners Church and Lo Mejor del Trio this past 7 years has brought a big blessing to Rojo Gomez. First the church, then the scholarships, then breakfast program, community center, sports park. Now the community has been developing as this partnership has developed. And we're really blessed to see kids staying in school, mothers coming and saying, this church is providing a meal to my kid, and I want to be a part of this church because this church now is taking care of this community. So now we can help the community by having their weddings, their quinceañeras, and be a part of the community, really being a blessing to the community. Together in our partnership, we started working with the locals to get involved in a sports field, a soccer field. Last week, we went and planted 28 trees and put in new nets, and the high schoolers working alongside with the locals and making the locals feel part of that sports field. They see what this partnership is doing in the community, and they're really grateful that God has put a heart for Rojo Gomez. So now seeing churches partnering together to work, seeing the big impact that has made in Rojo Gomez, and that's gonna continue doing because that's gonna grow, that gives us hope for El Niño, that gives us hope for Terrazas, that gives us hope for Rosarito, that gives us hope for Tijuana and for Mexico.
It's a great story, isn't it? But I think the thing that I love most about it is it's a visible picture of our mission statement. Ordinary people loving Jesus, fearlessly changing the world. But I can say that I have not been fearless. In fact, most of my life, I realized I was actually controlled by fear. I mean, I was so shy, and I never would take a stand. I'd never speak up in a class. I lived a very fearful, small life. And I realized that one of the reasons that so controlled me was because I wanted people to like me. I wanted you to like me. And I was afraid that if I said something that you didn't agree with, that you wouldn't like me anymore. And the danger of that was that I risked seeking your favor above his. But it was actually enrooted several years ago where I really came to grips and realized this problem in my life. And my rooted group prayed over me that day. And since then, I have had so much more freedom than I had ever felt before. And while it's still a monster that has to be faced down, I feel victory. In fact, my heart only starts pounding a few days ahead of standing up here, not weeks like it used to be. But a few weeks ago, I had a great privilege of going to Sri Lanka. And I really saw fearless leadership there. There is the DeVisser family, Adrian, Prashan, you've heard from them. And I got to watch and see what they have done. And just as a context, Christians are just 2% of the population in Sri Lanka. The rest are mostly Buddhist and Hindu. And they are truly an oppressed population. If you're a Christian, your churches are occasionally burned down and the pastors are sometimes just beaten. and they courageously live out their faith. And we've been partnering with them since the tsunami about 10 years ago. So I got to see some of the investments you have made in their ministry. I saw children's homes that you helped build, widows' homes, homes for single moms. And we got to hear of this amazing vision that they have to reach all of Asia, to train up leaders and pastors and send them out. Because Sri Lanka, surprisingly, is just a very small little island off the coast of India. But it's actually incredibly strategic because nobody has a problem with Sri Lanka. So it's easy to travel to come back and forth. And they have this beautiful vision that we would like to be a part of. And they also have a plan, and they are getting there to make this completely sustainable. And that's just one. Rojo Gomez and Sri Lanka are just two of the projects that we want to take on. And if you'd like to hear more of them, you can go to www.howtobefearless.com. But I would love to give you just a real quick snapshot of some of the other projects that we are proposing. Locally, we want to renovate a state-run foster home. And this is a facility that is for the kids that nobody wants. They're a little older, and they've got problems. And this facility is so run down that there are holes in the floor. And when we said we wanted to take this on, the social worker had tears in her eyes because she had given up hope that anybody was going to care for these kids. Then there's a homeless shelter that many of you regularly work with Lighthouse Church in Costa Mesa. It's an older building, and it desperately needs refurbishing too. Also, we want to serve over 6,000 meals this summer. And that will allow them to expand to 3 new locations. And also to equip battered women who have children in a local battered shelter for successful, independent living. And one of the things we get to do is help build them a vegetable garden. Globally, we want to partner with Free Wheelchair Mission, which is one of the most amazing organizations I've ever seen. And some of you, yes, we have a lot of fans of Free Wheelchair Mission. If you've been on one of the faith adventures and had the privilege of distributing these wheelchairs to people who have spent their life crawling in the dirt, it's incredible. Next, we also want to create jobs in one of the largest slums in Africa. This is an organization I got to witness in action last summer. It was amazing, mostly by training and skills, and also by 150 microfinance projects. Ken Johnny is somewhere around here today and will be at the Dream event, and so will Daisy, who has led the microfinance program from Kenya. Also, we want to train locals in some basic healthcare issues. The sad thing today is that there are hundreds of thousands of people still dying from very easily preventable diseases. And we want to be a part of empowering and bringing resources that will help the local churches in these areas address these very needed issues. And last, we want to help provide a home for 100 orphans in Uganda with Loving Hearts Baby Home, and we got fans for that too. And in Haiti, where the ground is broken and they're ready to build, and Pastor Samuel is here too to share about that. So that's a lot. It's a lot, and it could be overwhelming. And I know you must be wondering, how in the world could we do that? Okay. I skipped a part because it's hard to say it. My favorite part of this trip to Sri Lanka was we were invited one time in the evening to go to the girls' children's home. And they, several times a week, will do a worship service. And it's led by the girls. They're like ages 5 to 15. And so we go into this room, and one of the older girls picks up an empty Sparklets water bottle. That was their only instrument, and it turned into a beautiful drum. And then another of the older girls led out with prayer, and then they sang, and it was lovely. And then some of the other girls would pray, and then there'd be more songs. And finally, after a little while, one of the girls raises her hands, and she calls out this blessing on these girls. And she says, "The world will say, because you have been abandoned, you have no value, and nobody wants you. You are worthless in their sight." But that is a lie. The truth is, you have a loving Heavenly Father in heaven who will never leave you or forsake you, who loved you so much and considered you so precious that he came to earth and he died for you. He sacrificed himself so that you would know his love. And not only that, but he has given you a future of hope and a purpose. Will you not take a minute and tell your loving Father, tell your Lord, how grateful you are and how much you love him? And they burst into praise and prayer, and we burst into tears. It was one of the most moving things I think I've ever seen. And I tell you that story because while we talk about buildings and feeding and children's homes and community centers, what we are really about is to create the opportunity and the space where that truth can be proclaimed, because it is that truth that fills the empty, dark holes, that heals the wounds, and it truly changes lives. And that's what we're here for.
So, our staff has gotten together and they've chosen 50 projects, 33 or so locally, Orange County, and 25, 6, 7, whatever the math, that are globally. That's not quite right, 18, 17, 7. You got it. So the question is, we got these 50 projects. Our goal is that we're going to unleash this avalanche of generosity, $500,000. So what's your part? $39.95, all right? That's right. We did the math, all right? And here's how it figured out. If every person who goes to all of our churches and all of those of you that watch online give at least $39.95, we can release in the next couple of weeks $500,000. Now, some of you can do far more, and we're hoping that you will do far more. Some of you can't do anything, and we understand that because in the past you have done things. And in the future, I'm sure you will, but right now you can't. But we want all of you to be involved. For those of you that are sitting here going, I'm not a Bible-believing person, not a Christian, for sure don't even want that, but clearly not a disciple guy, we want you to play too, all right? You don't get a free pass, and here's why. You're always saying, you're a cynic, you're going, all the church wants is our money. I'll be honest with you, we want as much money as you'll give us. But today, that's not what we're asking for. We're asking you not to give anything to the church. We're asking you to give through the church. You live in this county. You want to make a difference. And so you can change Orange County for $39.95, all right? And here's what we've done is we've done all the hard work, okay? We went and found all the great projects. We went to the best organizations. We said, what is it that you want to accomplish? We did the work to find out what it is. We vetted all of these, and here's our promise to you. There's no administration fees. There's no handling fees. Every penny that you give goes right to these organizations. We're here to help. And there's some of you that have so much money, you don't even know what to do with your money. You look at the number on the bank, you're always worried. What am I going to do with that money? What happens if it goes away? We're going to help you with that, all right? Some of you have family foundations, and you've got the obligation to do even more with the money. What are you going to do? We're here to help you, all right? Some of you are chasing a train you can never catch, meaning you got so much money, you can't even spend it, as bad as you're trying. And we want to help you do good with your money. So here's your opportunity. Every penny, doesn't matter how big of a check you write, $1 million, it'll just go through, and every penny will go to these great organizations. So here's what I want you to do. First of all, if you're watching online, You have to play two, $39.95. In fact, you should give more because you didn't even have to spend gas to get here, all right? So what you do is you go on www.howtobefearless.org. And it has, just like buying something on Amazon, you can buy, right there you can get. For the rest of you, if you pull out this card, this thing right here, if you have money or if you actually carry checks, because you were born when the country was rent by a great civil war, and you actually still have checks, you can put a check in here. And then Lori and I have this running disagreement, which is you can also put your credit card number on here, and you can do that. How many of you are willing to put your credit card number on this right here? See, there's like 10 of you, you know, because Lori's going, no, they'll do it. She puts her credit card number anywhere. So here's what we've done for the rest of you, all right? Because we know you're not going to put a credit card number on there. As you walk out today, there's going to be people dressed in blue. They've got their little iPad thing here, and they're going to you get to walk up to them with the credit card, which you all do carry, all right? And you just hand them your credit card, and there's a little accountability because it'll go like this.
How can you be fearless today? How can I help you be fearless?
I'd like to put in $20.
Really? Did you not see the slide up here?
Okay, so then there you give them your credit card, then you tell them how much you're going to give them. And I'm giving way north of 30, because I'm covering for a lot of you that can't make it on your own, because I can. So, and that's 3 times I've done way more than that. So they take it, they zip it like that. And this is actual real time.
Sign, please, sir.
There you go. And there it is. Thank you. Done.
Thank you.
That's all
Done.
the longer it takes. Give me my card back. So, the little card. Oh, you can keep it. And it's for everybody. So, step up there. So you go. Because it's everyone. And all of you that brought your kids, you got to count them. If they're sitting here, they're on you. They're $39.95. All right? $39.95. Because she gave last service and she's like poor. How much
Could you
did
sign here,
give?
ma'am? She actually gave $1 more than you.
Because I'm more generous.
You don't have that much money. Did you know how much I gave, really?
I do.
Because I don't think you know how much money I gave.
I do. I beat you.
You don't have that much money, really.
He's not competitive.
Okay, for the cynical ones of you, all right? Just want to talk to you because you want out like, yeah, but does it really matter? And, you know, if I give, will it really make a difference? You need to understand that is such a Christian way of thinking, meaning that negative or non-Christian way of thinking. Why do we give? We don't give because it will change the world. We give, we hope it will. But we give because God first gave to us. That's why we give. And so when we look at this moment, it isn't about, it's like God gave to me. And because God gave to me, I want to change the world. That's the kind of people that we are. So, you've got this card. You want to talk about this card?
Thank you. If you have this card, can you guys pull it out? One of the things I'm super excited about with this card is you heard the story of the Good Samaritan. It's not just about giving. It's about holistically, how can we as a community be fearlessly generous? And so on this card, there's different ways that you can play a role and you can be a part of this. When I'm out in the patio, so many people ask me, hey, can I be a part of this? Can I serve? Can I be a part of the projects? And absolutely, yes, you can. If you look at the first line there, it talks about ways that you can serve. And we did the math again for the projects, all 50 projects. Do you know how much time you guys would have to give to complete all 50 projects?
How much? 3 hours each.
3 hours of every single person.
Every one of you gave 3. Now, some of you aren't, so others have to carry the weight here because.
And you think about, what do you spend 2 or 3 hours doing during the week? Watching TV? You could be out making a difference in Orange County. The second thing you saw was the giving. It's on there, $39.95. And we're hoping and praying that we are a generous community. We go over that because we are excited and ready if we do. The last thing that's on there is the food banks are at 40% in our community. And so we want to give away 50 tons of food to fill those food banks back up. All you have to do is write down what you're committing to, put your name and information, and find somebody with a blue shirt like me. Actually, I will be out there right on the patio, and I would love to help you be fearless in the community.
All right, there you have it. You ready? Okay, here's your opportunity, all right? We are going to change Orange County with our generosity, right? Stand up, get your wallets out, get your credit cards ready, All right, hold out your hands and receive God's blessing. Father, look at your children. They love you. Would you overwhelm them this week with the truth of how much you love them? And then cause them to be generous in their hearts to give, not because it's going to change the world, but because you first gave to them. And then, God, would you make us a church that is known for its generosity? We pray in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, on your mark, get set, go.